In this series of conversations, Vidhi speaks with queer academics, lawyers, and activists on marriage equality and beyond. The series touches upon the marriage equality petitions before the Supreme Court of India and the relationship between queer movements and the law. It highlights the need for community consultation, the importance of legal recognition to intimacies beyond marriage, demands of the transgender community, and the future of family law in India.
In this conversation on Vidhi Beyond Marriage Equality, we speak with Koyel Ghosh, a queer feminist activist and Managing Trustee of Sappho for Equality, about the importance of recognition of intimacies beyond marriage in light of the marriage equality petitions.
Hi, I'm Namrata. I am from the Vidhi Centre for Legal Policy, and we're joined today by Koyel Ghosh from Sappho for Equality. Meenakshi Shonnal of Sappho from Equality is a petitioner in the marriage equality petitions that are presently being heard in the Supreme Court of India. But this decision to be a petitioner was a collective decision taken by Sappho from Equality, and they are being represented through Meenakshi Shonnal, who is the second petitioner in the Rituparna Bora petition. Just to introduce you to our speaker today, we are joined by Koyel Ghosh, who is a gender non-conforming, non-binary queer feminist activist and the managing trustee of Sappho for Equality. They are a trained educator who continues to impart knowledge and love to young minds over half a decade. Their vision is to collectively create a gender just society where no one is excluded on the basis of their gender identity or sexual orientation. Koyel is focused on collective healing and radical kindness as their motto to sustain the legacy of the Activist Rights Forum Sappho for Equality. They've also co-authored the book Gender Chemistry, Non-Binary Life Scripts. Thank you for joining us today, Koyel. We're really grateful to have you.
Thank you, Namrata.
Just to start off this conversation, could you throw a little bit of light on the motivation behind Sappho for Equality for joining as petitioners in the marriage equality petitions that are undergoing in the Supreme Court now?
The motivation, I think, is very clear. And, it was not an easy decision for us, but because we as an organization has always had a very anti-marriage stance, realizing that marriage is a very patriarchal institution. And, it being emulated in queer trans relationships can also actually fail as a system, right? We've had several conversations on marriage and marriage rights and what it would do to queer and trans people in terms of in terms of entitlements that we have all rights towards. But during the Supreme Court hearing and the petitions that were given, we had a lot of meetings at that point of time, and we were realizing that we have to also understand what the community wants. What is the need of the community, what is the context in India today is very different, specifically after the decriminalization of section 377, the partial decriminalization. A lot of people have started coming out of their closet and have started identifying as queer trans people, and also openly talking about their relationship, as a result of which there has been a lot of violence, natal family violence,
Right.
public space violence, job related violence, education related violence that is being meted out to queer and trans individuals the moment they choose to express themselves the way they want to, right? And this has also led to a lot of crisis that we've seen in the recent 4-5 years, in terms of people being thrown out of their natal homes, their documents being burnt, they being forced to forced to get married to a heterosexual man, so that they can be cured of their homosexuality.
Right.
Something or queerness or transness, something as simple as coercive rape that has been also done on a lot of queer trans people. And this has really it made us understand that marriage does come with a lot of rights.
Correct.
It comes with a lot of protection.
Yeah.
And when it comes to queer trans individuals, I feel that if you have certain rights in place, certain laws in place, your survival will get a little, not very easy, but a little better,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
Shanna is our advisor and previous managing trustee of the organization. She's also the co-founder of Sappho for Equality,
Right.
and she had taken it upon herself and filed the marriage petition. But that was done in collaboration with all the collective members, and we all had our consent to this. And she's done that. And other than that, there are also other anonymous petitioners who are, people we've interacted during our crisis intervention
Mm.
situations. There are some people we've been able to rescue, and all of them, like two couples are from from our region, and they're all anonymous. There is no name, there's no mention, just their situation has been mentioned, so that the court can take into cognizance the kind of violence that happens on queer trans individuals the moment they try to express themselves or live a life of their own choice with or without their partner.
Right. I think what's particularly interesting about your petition, I mean, you had mentioned that Sappho has a anti-marriage stance, but strategically it made sense for Sappho to join this particular matter given the set of rights that come with the institution of marriage, which makes survival relatively easier for queer people. I think what's particularly interesting about your petition and why the petition stands out is because, in addition to demanding marriage equality, you've also made this prayer for recognition of atypical families, right? And I think you've drawn from the Mental Health Care Act of 2017 the concept of a nominee that can be appointed by someone under the act. And that nominee does not have to be a kin related by
Yeah.
blood or marriage, it can be any person.
So
So
I'll tell you the context for this. I'm sorry, you just finish what you're saying.
no, so essentially, I mean, one of your prayers speaks for recognition of atypical families. And it says that people should have the right to nominate anyone to take decisions on their behalf. And that goes beyond health, right? It could be finance, health as well, amongst other things. So I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about the conversations you had which led to this prayer being formulated? And what is the atypical family that you are praying for recognition of before the Supreme Court?
To be very honest, we've had this conversation for quite some time, almost 12 years, more than that. We realized that the natal family that is supposedly a place of comfort and shelter and refuge, is not the same for queer trans individuals. It becomes a site of a lot of violence, right? And, we ourselves have created chosen families,
Right.
alternative forms of families, which are not related by blood or by marriage. These are people we've met through, their commonality and their, shared understanding of what family should look like,
Mm.
right? When we also come with, when we are doing our crisis intervention work, we've seen that a lot of queer trans individuals who have been victims of and survivors of domestic abuse and verbal abuse and all kinds of abuse, they have found solace in each other. They have found family and alternative sense of bonding with each other. And all of us together have formed this kind of this sense of kinship, which cannot be described in words. It's not something that you develop because you are related in some way. It is
Yeah.
something that you nurture, you grow, you believe
Yeah.
in, and you live by. So if something happens to me, for example, I would not want my natal family to take decisions on my behalf. I would want my alternative, my chosen family, the family of my choice, the family that I've made, nurtured like a tree, every day watering it, taking care of it. I would want that family, people from that place, to take decisions on my behalf, whether it is pulling out a plug, whether it is a little bit of whatever property I've been able to acquire, even
Mm.
it is as small as a scooty. I would want my chosen family to have rights on everything that I have, and not someone who has abandoned me, not some people who has constantly negated my existence, my entire being,
Mm.
uh, in their attempt to cure me of my queerness or my transness, right?
Correct.
So, chosen family is a reality. It's a reality of queer trans individuals that need to come, not just queer trans individuals, actually, not just queer
Yeah.
trans individuals,
Yeah.
anybody who believes in alternative forms of family,
Correct.
and that for them, you know, family's definition should change. This, it should not be a watertight understanding of who or what family is,
Right.
because we've seen that family also will only support you or be by you until and unless you dance to their tunes.
Absolutely.
You do
Yeah.
things according to their understanding of societal norms. They will not be with you in any way. They will try to control your agency, your autonomy over your own body, over your own life, by constantly directing you towards the norms of the society. And it becomes extremely transphobic, extremely queerphobic for a lot of people. I've seen so many people in the last 3 4 years going through several amount of mental health complications because of the family violence that they faced, because of the kind of constant uh, argumentative behavior, that the kind of trouble that the family has created in their life, in their mental peace.
Hmm.
So yes, I think in our petition we have spoken about choosing family. We have spoke to, because a little maybe a month or 2 months back, there was somebody who was put on a rehabilitation center by their natal family, and we realized that the represented nominee, when we went through the Mental Health Act in coordination with a lot of mental health practitioners, we realized that this chosen nominee has to be somebody who is related to you by blood or by marriage
Hmm.
or by things like that, or by child or by adoption.
Yeah.
So we felt that nominee for everything should not be, monitored by these three factors. There
Yeah.
are so many other forms of families that we create who could be decision makers in our lives. So
Right.
yeah, this is what our petition talks about.
Right. And I think that subversive friendships have played such a critical role for queer people. And the dominant discourse now, as marriage being the central form of intimacy that queer people value, kind of invisibilizes the fact that queer people have largely relied upon community support and on kins beyond blood and marriage when it comes to being able to live what many people call livable lives. And so it's really interesting because not only does your prayer challenge the centrality of marriage, but it's also essentially challenging, the heteronormative institution that also is the site of endogamy in India, and kind of pushing the boundaries of the kinds of intimacies that the law needs to make space for beyond
Right,
marriage.
right,
I think is
right.
very interesting because you're kind of also pushing the boundaries of law and saying that you need to expand your imagination and
Exactly,
understand that this is not the only form of intimacy that needs to be protected and recognized. We are
exactly.
intimate in as many ways as we exist, right? And I think just speaking of your prayer, I wanted to talk a little bit about the public hearing that the National Network of LBI Women and Trans Persons had organized with PUCL in Delhi in April. And then Sappho had come out with a report about how our own hurt us. And I was wondering if you could take us through the process of speaking with people, and then, of course, discussing that at a public hearing, and then the objective that this report seeks to serve.
Hmm. Thank you for the question. I think, yes, we have done a closed door hearing. It's not a public, the closed door hearing that we have done, and it was done in Delhi, and people from all over the country, people who identify as queer and trans, and it was done by a network of organizations.
Right.
There was Sappho, there was Nazaria, there was Cutie Center,
Mm.
there was Sathi, there was Sahatrika. There
Mm.
were so many, other organizations which, and even anonymous petitioners
Mm.
who had joined in hands, and we wanted to do this Jansun by or a closed door hearing. It
Mm.
was done in a very, I love the way how we had managed to do it, because it was done keeping in mind the confidentiality and the anonymity of
Mm.
people and their security. So, when people wanted to share their stories with us, and it was such a healing process also, I feel, because we don't get to tell our tales through our own voices, right?
Right.
We don't get to tell our own stories with the help of, in front of a room full of people, uh, knowing that our emotions will be held,
Correct.
knowing that people understand and hear you from
Yeah.
where you're coming from what kind of turmoils you've gone through. And these were difficult stories. These were difficult stories of 14-year-old people, trans masculine individuals forced to get married,
Yeah.
to a heterosexual person, and forced to, give birth to a child. And what that does to one's dysphoria, what that does to uh, one's understanding of their own gender, and that sharing space. It was such a moment which was very heavy, which was very difficult for each of us sitting in that room. And there were also people who would only speak in front of the panelists.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of, like, we had 7 panelists. There was Paramita Chakraborty, there was Beena Gowda, there were many more,
Yeah.
uh, all of them. There was this alternative option also given, where people could only speak in front of the panelists. If they didn't want the room to be, filled with people, they could
Right.
only speak in front of the panelists.
Correct.
And just Pravas Sridevan was also there
Mm.
during most of the hearing, and she heard us.
Yeah.
And at, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel recognized, you feel someone is there to look at you and listen to you. And that feeling is I don't know what that what will be the outcome of the report, or what is going to happen. But I think the process itself was extremely important, extremely vital, and it gave a lot of comfort and catharsis to a lot of people. So I
Yeah.
think that was what the meeting was all about. And it gave people to meet each other, and people who stay in different parts of the country and has never met each other,
Yeah.
and has no access to the movement space. And they come and meet each other, and they don't even know each other's language, but they could communicate and understand that language, shared trauma that they've gone through, the
Yeah.
bonding that was happening. It was so holistic to see. It was so holistic to witness that, to be part of that historical thing that was happening
Yeah.
between those closed doors. And the report that has come out has been done not just by Sappho, but by everybody who was part of the LBI network. A lot of us had put in our heart, our labor,
Yeah.
everything to make that report, and to ensure that the report remains confidential. At no point does there should be any breach of that anonymity
Yeah.
that could render anybody in any kind of trouble. you
Right.
know because
Right.
a lot of them are still in hiding, a lot of them are still on the run, a
Yeah.
lot of them are still running from the police, from the family, from the society, from the neighbors. And this distressed migration that
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah.
that you don't choose, but you're constantly homeless. This sense of homelessness, this sense of not having any root, is so real for queer trans people.
Yeah.
No matter which class, caste, position they belong to, this
Yeah.
is a very common feeling.
We
So
can.
the report has come out, and the report has also been submitted while Vrinda Grover is representing our case, and while she's speaking, the report has been submitted,
Right.
and we hope the report is read. I don't know what the outcome of this entire petition or all these petitions will happen. I don't know,
Yeah.
but to be very honest, I want them to read
Yeah.
the reality of the people they're trying to help through this process, and that the cynic in me feels that it is intrinsic that people know that lives that you see are not the only lives that people lead. There are so many
Absolutely.
queer trans individuals whose stories, whose lives never sees the light of the day.
Yeah.
Nobody knows the struggles, the hurdles they've undergone to reach where they have reached.
Absolutely.
We don't talk about the people who we have lost,
Yeah.
during this process. There are
Yeah.
so many people I myself has witnessed after I've taken up the leadership position in Sappho for Equality. I've seen so many people, giving up,
Yeah.
choosing to give up.
Correct.
And you know it is not that they've died because they died out of suicide. They did not die because they committed suicide. They died because there was structural uh, it was a structural way of uh, it was a structural matter, to be very honest.
Yeah.
It was because the society failed us. It is because families failed us. It is because people failed us in education institutions. People failed us in jobs. People
Yeah.
failed to support queer trans individuals who are vulnerable,
Mm.
and that is why they died. They did not die because they just chose to one fine day end their lives. No, it didn't happen like that, and that is not the truth. So
Yeah.
that needs to come forward. That needs to be spoken about. That needs to be heard. That needs to be conversed. That these are the realities of queer trans individuals who
Yeah.
are like dying every day, who are giving up on their lives every day because of lack of support, because of lack of any kind of empathy
Yeah.
from the society at large.
Yeah. And I also think just, courts are not accessible to everyone. There are certain people who often speak behalf on other people of other people
Right.
in courts, right? Which is essentially lawyers.
Right.
And so I think it's so important to kind of have these spaces where people can come forward with their own narratives in their own voice and be witnessed, and
Right.
also do this in a space that is safe, do this in a space where they're heard, do this in a space where they're acknowledged, and do this in a space where they find community and expand community. And
Right.
courts can't be the only space through which we also claim rights or which we claim vindication. And it's so important
Right.
to have these conversations parallelly and also to come out with the report that you've come out with, because I feel like these narratives are not necessarily being spoken about as much during the course of this litigation. So I think it's a very important piece of text that everyone should read to understand that traditional families have failed queer people, and it is a necessity for us to recognize intimacies beyond traditional structures of family. And I think what's also really interesting about your petition is that it doesn't just benefit queer people. If anything, it benefits everyone, right? Anyone who wants to live a queerer life, anyone who wants to kind of have, say, perhaps a best friend be their nominated representative, or even a sibling for that matter, right? So I think that's really interesting that it's not just about queer folks, it's about all folks, including individual folks across gender, across sexual orientation. So I think in that sense, your petition is rather radical because it hopes for a queerer world for everyone, irrespective of gender identity and sexual orientation. But thank you so much, Koyel, for joining us today and sharing with us. And we hope to continue to have more conversations with you and Sappho for Equality. Are there any closing words that you would like to share with the audience before we conclude and hopefully get in touch again soon for further conversations like this?
I think the one thing that I would want to talk about is that with or without marriage, chosen families will not cease to exist. With or
Absolutely.
without the law, these
Absolutely.
are things that are realities, and we are going to live by it.
Yeah.
Uh, Laws are going to help us live
Yeah.
it with a little more dignity. But
Yeah.
with or without it, we are still going to survive and strive and
Absolutely.
struggle because
Yeah.
that's who we are, and we are not going to give up and go away. And so, if you're there, if you're hearing to this, you're listening to us. Please know that there are a lot of places, lots of organizations, lots of collectives that are working today. So before, if you feel lonely, if you feel alone, please feel free to reach out for help. There are people listening to you.
Yeah.
Don't Please don't take any drastic decisions without looking out, because there is a ray of light. There are people with you
Yeah.
supporting. That's what I always say at the end of any conversation, and that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to say.
And I think that's a really important point because I think people often forget that queer people have existed and thrived despite the law for the longest time.
Yes.
And that, of course, law makes a difference in our day to day lives. It's
Correct.
important for us to have equal rights at par with everybody else. It's important for us to have a robust anti discrimination framework, which tackles instances of discrimination at educational institutions, at employment. But despite that, for the longest time, queer communities have thrived, have sustained themselves, have lived their authentic lives, even when the law hasn't been on our side. And I think that's something we need to constantly keep speaking about, that we don't necessarily always need the law to see us and
Right.
validate us. and tell us what kinds of lives we are allowed to live. And I think that's like a great closing message. But thank you so much, Koyel. It was really nice having this conversation with you. And we hope to keep having these conversations with you and people at Sappho.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. I feel humbled, I feel heard, and thank you. Lots of love.